Welcome back to CIA Declassified. The year is 1950. America is standing on the precipice of a new kind of conflict, one fought not with lead, but with beliefs. The Red Scare is tightening its grip on the American psyche, and the Central Intelligence Agency has a problem. They need to fund a massive radio network to broadcast into the Soviet bloc, but they can't do it openly without admitting to a violation of international sovereignty. The stage is set, a post-war America of white picket fences, town squares, and a deep-seated desire to be the good guys. Enter the National Committee for a Free Europe. To the average citizen, this was a grassroots movement of concerned patriots. In reality, it was a sophisticated front, a mighty Wurlitzer played by the agency to harmonize domestic opinion with foreign policy. They didn't just want your money, they wanted your consensus. They transformed the struggle for global influence into a moral crusade, making every American a foot soldier in a war of information. This was a time of celebrity endorsements, massive floats, and a 10-ton bell forged in England and sent on a tour across the heartland. Imagine the dust kicked up by the motorcade in a small Midwestern town, the brass bands playing, and the local mayor shaking hands with a representative who was, unbeknownst to the town, on the agency's secret payroll. The crusade wasn't just an event, it was a psychological environment meticulously crafted to ensure that the American taxpayer would not only tolerate the Cold War, but would actively demand its escalation. It was the birth of the modern influence campaign, where the line between a civilian donation and a clandestine operation became invisible. But there's more to this story than just fundraising. This was about the total mobilization of the American spirit. The agency realized that for the Cold War to be sustainable, it couldn't just be a government policy. It had to be a civic religion. They recruited the best minds from Madison Avenue, the kings of advertising, to apply the same techniques used to sell soap to the sale of ideology. They wanted you to feel a personal stake in every transmitter tower built in West Germany. They wanted every housewife, every factory worker, and every school child to believe that their spare change was the literal ammunition of democracy. They created a feedback loop where domestic enthusiasm provided the political cover for international meddling, and international crises were then used to fuel more domestic enthusiasm. The Freedom Bell became the physical anchor for this loop, a massive bronze psychological trigger that rang with the promise of liberty but was cast in the furnaces of deep state necessity. This is the era of the Crusade for Freedom. How did this operation earn its moniker? The reason for the name Crusade for Freedom was a deliberate choice by psychological warfare experts to tap into the religious and historical imagery of the West. By framing the Cold War as a crusade, the agency's Office of Policy Coordination utilized a term that implied a holy war against a godless enemy. It was a branding masterstroke. The word freedom was paired with crusade to create a linguistic shield. Anyone who questioned the funding or the methods of the campaign was effectively positioned as an enemy of liberty itself. It wasn't just a fundraiser. It was a crusade for the very soul of the American public. Let's pull back the curtain on the raw data. Here are the documented anchors of the operation, followed by the voices of those who designed the illusion. The Crusade for Freedom was launched by General Lucius D. Clay on Labor Day, 1950, with a national radio address. The campaign served as the primary funding vehicle and public cover for Radio Free Europe, which the CIA covertly managed until 1971. Future President Ronald Reagan served as a prominent spokesperson, recording numerous radio spots urging Americans to help lift the Iron Curtain. The Freedom Bell was a 10-ton bronze monument cast in England by Gillette and Johnston, the same foundry that repaired the Liberty Bell. The agency used the campaign to collect freedom pledges from 16 million Americans, creating a massive index of anti-communist sentiment. General Dwight D. Eisenhower lent the campaign immense authority by delivering its inaugural speech at Columbia University. The campaign raised over $1.3 million in its first year, though the vast majority of Radio Free Europe's true operating costs were covered by secret CIA transfers. The campaign's Freedom Grams allowed citizens to write messages that were allegedly dropped behind the Iron Curtain via balloons. The Advertising Council provided millions of dollars in free airtime and billboard space to promote the crusade. The National Committee for a Free Europe included board members like Alan Dulles, who later became the director of Central Intelligence. The Freedom Bell was permanently installed in the Rathaus Schöneberg, I think I'm butchering that, Rathaus space Schoneberg in Berlin on October 24th, 1950. The freedom pledges were often signed inside mobile freedom trucks that toured rural American towns. Henry Ford II served as the national chairman of the crusade, lending the campaign massive corporate legitimacy. The campaign produced a film titled The Big Lie, which was distributed to schools and civic groups across the country. The CIA's Office of Policy Coordination used the crusade to funnel funds to exile groups from Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. The Freedom Bell contains the inscription, quote, "that this world under God shall have a new birth of freedom," end quote. The campaign utilized freedom scrolls, which were flown to Berlin as part of a highly publicized freedom flight. CIA agent Cord Meyer was a key architect in ensuring the Crusade's messaging aligned with the agency's international propaganda goals. The Crusade influenced the creation of the United States Information Agency. By 1952, the Crusade had expanded to include Youth for Freedom chapters in American universities. The campaign used the Bell logo on everything from postage stamps to cigarette lighters. Radio Free Europe was originally nicknamed the Crusade's Voice in early internal planning documents. The project's domestic focus was so successful that it served as a model for the American Friends of the Middle East, another CIA front. The Freedom Bell was rung daily in Berlin for years to synchronize with the Radio Free Europe broadcast start times. The campaign relied on block captains in American suburbs to solicit donations door to door. The CIA's Budget Advisory Committee classified the Crusade's expenses under Project QK Active. Over 2,000 balloons carrying freedom grams were launched from West Germany in a single day in 1951. The campaign's messaging was reviewed by the Psychological Strategy Board. Celebrity supporters included Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, who recorded promotional messages. The Freedom Bell tour was so popular that it was extended by 3 months due to public demand. The agency used the Crusade for Freedom to test the effectiveness of emotional appeal versus rational appeal in propaganda. In 1956, the Crusade faced its first major crisis when Radio Free Europe was accused of inciting the Hungarian uprising. The freedom pledges were archived in a vault beneath the Rathaus Schöneberg in Berlin. The project utilized the services of J. Walter Thompson, a major global advertising company. The National Committee for a Free Europe maintained a special projects division that managed the balloon launches into Eastern Europe. Records show that the CIA used the Crusade for Freedom to scout potential stay-behind agents among Eastern European exile communities. The campaign sponsored freedom parades in New York City that attracted over 250,000 attendees. Memos indicate that Radio Free Europe was strictly instructed to never mention its CIA funding during Crusade promotional segments. The General Federation of Women's Clubs was a major organizational partner in collecting domestic pledges. The campaign used a specialized ink for the Freedom Scrolls designed to remain legible for 200 years. The agency mapped the density of donations by zip code to identify regions of low patriotism for targeted future messaging. Radio Liberty, originally called Radio Liberation, was integrated into the Crusade's financial reporting by 1953. The Crusade utilized psychological warfare workshops to train local volunteers on how to handle dissenters at public rallies. Records indicate that the agency used the Crusade for Freedom to test subliminal oral cues in shortwave radio filler music. The Freedom Bell tour required a secret security detail for over 40 agency-vetted personnel at all time, a secret security detail of over 40 agency-vetted personnel at all times. The campaign integrated with the Boy Scouts of America to distribute truth literature door to door. Internal audits confirm the administrative cost of the campaign was artificially inflated to hide covert operational spending. The Crusade utilized visual language experts to ensure the Freedom Bell's silhouette became a subconscious icon of stability. Documentation reveals the project funded a secret linguistic lab to determine which words caused the most physiological stress in listeners. The agency monitored the mail flow of participants to see if the campaign shifted their personal political discourse. The Freedom Flight used unmarked military aircraft to transport the 16 million signatures across the Atlantic. The project established truth strips, comic-style propaganda that were inserted into local Sunday newspapers. Factual records prove the Crusade's slogans were tested on focus groups in Washington, D.C. before national release. The campaign used mock interrogations at state fairs to show the public how the enemy operated. A quote from General Lucius D. Clay, dated 1950, "This is a campaign to give the American people a way to participate in the struggle against communist lies." Quote from a declassified internal CIA memorandum from the Office of Policy Coordination. "The Crusade for Freedom is the most successful psychological operation ever conducted by this agency on a domestic population." End quote. Quote from a declassified policy directive for Radio Free Europe personnel. "We are not just broadcasting news, we are broadcasting the American way of life as a spiritual necessity." And a quote from a declassified Crusade for Freedom promotional film. "Our job is to make the average American feel that his dollar is the bullet that kills a Soviet myth." End quote. While the declassified files for the Crusades for Freedom provide a wealth of data, the most sensitive and heavily guarded sections, totaling over 610 pages, are found in the folders labeled Project Personnel Domestic Infiltration and Direct Liaison Media Executives 1951. These are the records that detail exactly which American newsrooms were taking orders from the agency. The agency maintains that these redactions under Exemption B3, claiming that revealing these names would compromise active methods of domestic perception management. Now let's move into the speculative void. If you listen to the whispers in the dark corners of the archives, there is a theory that the Freedom Bell wasn't just a monument, but a delivery system. Some suggest the redacted pages hide the results of infrasonic conditioning tests. The speculation is that the bell's resonance was tuned to a frequency that induces a state of high suggestibility in human crowds. In this version of history, the tour wasn't just a parade, it was a mass-scale experiment to see if sound could be used to bypass the critical thinking of an entire town, making the patriotic fervor that followed a result of biology, not belief. Then there is the shadow of the domestic sleeper index. Analysts who have studied the gaps in the record argue that the 16 million freedom pledges were actually the foundation of a compliance database. The theory suggests that the redacted pages detail how the CIA categorized every signer based on their propaganda receptivity. They believe the agency used this data to identify families who would be the most easily manipulated during a national crisis, effectively creating a map of the most obedient citizens in the United States for future domestic control operations. In the more cynical reaches of the rumor mill, they speak of the corporate protection racket. This theory posits that the redactions cover up a list of American companies that were coerced into donating. The speculation is that the agency didn't just ask for money, they threatened labor instability or regulatory nightmares for any CEO who didn't get behind the crusade. If true, the redacted pages contain the evidence that the CIA was essentially running a state-sponsored extortion ring inside the U.S. business sector to fund its secret wars. Beyond the corporate squeeze, a darker frequency suggests the balloon payload anomaly. Some fringe theorists believe the balloons carrying freedom grams were also carrying trace amounts of aerosolized behavioral markers. The speculation is that the redacted pages describe a covert test to see if biological dispersal could be tracked via the very letters the public was writing, turning a message of hope into a biological tracking system for the Eastern Bloc. Finally, we find the Hollywood puppet master hypothesis. Many believe the blacked out sections detail the direct script approval rights the agency held over every major television network during the Crusade's peak. The speculation is that the Crusade for Freedom was the secret bank account for an office in Los Angeles that ensured the Cold War was sold in every sitcom and drama. This would mean that a generation of American culture wasn't just influenced by the CIA. It was ghost-written by them to ensure the bell kept ringing in the back of everyone's mind. Was the Crusade for Freedom a success? Tactically, it was a masterclass. It successfully laundered millions of dollars for Radio Free Europe while maintaining a grassroots facade for over 2 decades. Strategically, like so many of the CIA's projects and policies, it was a double-edged sword. While it unified the American public, it also created a precedent for domestic propaganda that damaged the agency's credibility when it was finally exposed in the 1970s. Ultimately, it was a success because it proved that public-private partnerships could be weaponized. It effectively sold the Cold War to a generation, ensuring that the defense budget remained unquestioned for a quarter century. The operation successfully built a bridge between the intelligence community and the American living room. It proved that a well-crafted symbol, like a 10-ton bell, could distract from the more complex and morally gray reality of international espionage. The campaign was a resounding success in domestic behavioral alignment, demonstrating that the agency could lead the American public into a specific psychological posture without the public ever realizing they were being moved. It also successfully institutionalized the use of third-party validators, trusted civilians like Reagan and Ford, to deliver government messages. Finally, the project's success is seen in its longevity. The freedom brand it created survived long after the agency's direct hand was revealed, proving that a well-planted myth can outlive its creators. The project also succeeded in masking the true scale of the CIA's technical infrastructure, using the public's small-dollar donations as a massive smokescreen for the construction of globe-spanning relay stations. By the time the curtain was pulled back, the Crusade had already permanently altered the American political landscape, making a state of permanent mobilization appear as a natural civilian consensus. As far as technological and operational breakthroughs go, the hearts and hype of the Crusade resulted in breakthroughs that define modern influence, such as large-scale public opinion modeling. The CIA's analysis of the Freedom Pledges led to the first sophisticated algorithms for targeted demographic messaging, a direct ancestor to the data analytics used in modern political campaigning. Transcontinental high-power broadcasting. The technical requirements for Radio-Free Europe led to breakthroughs in signal refraction and high-wattage transmitters that allowed Western broadcasts to punch through Soviet jamming. Tech, now used in global satellite communications. Front organization management. The agency perfected the art of the proprietary entity, creating legal structures that allowed government money to flow through nonprofits. This operational structure is used today by various NGOs and think tanks worldwide. And mass psychological priming. The Freedom Bell Tour was the first major study in symbolic anchoring, showing how physical monuments can be used to trigger specific emotional responses across broad population. This is now a cornerstone of nation branding and public diplomacy. The crusade for freedom reminds us that the sound of a bell is only as honest as the hand that pulls the rope. It was an era where the line between information and manipulation was erased in the name of liberty. The Freedom Bell still hangs in Berlin, but the echoes of its tour still ring through the halls of modern media. We must always ask when we hear the ring of truth, is it a natural chime or a carefully tuned broadcast? The shadows of the crusade show us that the most effective way to lead a people is to make them believe they are the ones leading the charge. This operation established the template for every modern hearts and minds campaign, reminding us that the most powerful weapon in any arsenal is the consent of the governed. The legacy of the crusade lives on in the very way we perceive global conflict, filtered through the same patriotic lenses that were ground and polished in 1950. As we navigate an age of digital influence, the ghost of the crusade reminds us that the most successful propaganda is the kind you pay for with your own dollar. The bell may be bronze, but its shadow is cast in the ink of every redacted page still locked in the vault. The ring of that bell wasn't just a sound, it was a signal that the inner lives of citizens were now open territory for the state. Thanks for listening. Stay vigilant and listen for the silence between the tolls. Join us next time as we examine MK Ritual. In the deepest basements of the agency, they weren't just looking at drugs, they were looking at the power of the occult. We'll uncover the facts behind the investigation into using symbolic rituals to enhance psychological conditioning. It was a war of science and symbolism. Join us next time for The Alchemist Needle. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.